Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Boys and girls, do you remember those days before screens when all we had to work with was our imaginations? Well, they're kind of making a comeback. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brains about current projects, state of the industry, well, basically anything we can think of in a light and conversational fashion, because that's how we like to do it here. And if you like how we do it, I'm assuming you do because you're listening right now, you can find us basically wherever you find your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, it's all good. And you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd love it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I dare say most importantly, please give us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest movie news and reviews from the world of cinema, television, and anything else we want to talk about, because we love the moving image, and we love it when you read about it. So please pay us a visit. But on this episode, we got an interesting one. We're kind of shifting into the world of comic books, and not the Marvel DC kind, something else. We're talking about Elfquest, and we are talking about Elfquest, the audio movie, which is in the process of funding and pre-production now, which it's a really sort of fascinating thing. Like, if anybody knows about Elfquest, it is an iconic comic book from the likes of Wendy and Richard Pini, who created it all the way back in 1978, and they've really given us this sort of like, the comic itself is just this wild ride, this real labyrinth of sort of fantasy and love and violence, and it was a comic that said a lot but also meant a lot to so many people. It really sort of stood on its own in a very interesting and weird pack of comic book material, and the stuff has been around forever, and they're making Elfquest the audio movie, as I said. And I guess your first question is, what the hell is an audio movie? I mean, that was my question too. Why not make a real movie? But in talking with Wendy and Richard, the creators of Elfquest, I kind of got on board with them because, it's a weird landscape that we're in right now, especially when it comes to comic books, and to hear them talk about sort of translating this iconic fantasy comic into an audio experience, which we have to let the visual sort of play out in our head. It's really a bit of a throwback. I mean, even a bit of a throwback to sort of the radio dramas and people like Orson Welles before he was making plays and stunning the world with things like Citizen Kane. He was scaring the crap out of people on the radio with things like War of the Worlds, reading H.G. Wells, and it's almost one of those things that reminds you how cyclical sort of the way we consume our entertainment is. And I'm really looking forward to Elfquest, the audio movie. And after you've listened to our talk with Wendy and Richard, I think you will be too, because it's sounding like it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun, and this talk with them certainly was, so I hope you enjoy. Now, I mean, obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today. I really do appreciate it. Now, I'm kind of curious because as I was reading up on Elfquest and just sort of reading up on the history and sort of this launch that you're doing with this audio only movie, I guess this kind of leads into my first question. Given sort of the state of the media landscape and comic book material being so hot, why are you going lo-fi? It almost seems like, why aren't you trying to shoot for the moon and go, hi-fi, I guess would be the right question.
Are you kidding?
Well, this first, it requires a definition. What are you defining as lo-fi and hi-fi?
Well, just in terms of just as an audio movie, like the idea of an audio movie definitely feels a little more lo-fi than perhaps producing a, you know, $300 million, action adventure, larger than life thing on the big
David,
screen.
David, do you know how Hollywood works? We've been at this for 40 years trying to get an Elfquest movie made. We probably know more about the ins and outs of Hollywood and how to avoid absolute disaster than anybody else in the business.
So I guess is this you guys avoiding disaster?
Well, in part. Another answer to your initial question is, do you happen to have a spare $299.75 million that you are willing to give to us, not lend, not invest, but just make a gift? Hollywood has taught us, as Wendy just said, every possible lesson in how to be seduced and how to be let down. And we are thrilled to be coming at Elfquest and to adapt Elfquest into a different format. We're thrilled to be doing it this way because as the audio movies producer, Fred Greenhalgh, says, this is feeding directly into the listener's imagination.
Yes.
We are beaming a movie directly into your brain, and you get to populate it and color it and special effects it any which way you want. It's the perfect individual personalized experience.
I love it. And I mean it's such a simple idea, but it's an amazing idea at the same time, and it's one of these things that really does feel like it allows for almost more fan interaction with it, because like you say, you can sort of you're going to have the visuals going on in your head no matter what. And I'm kind of curious, now correct me if I'm wrong, so far this has almost been entirely sort of funded by fans with fan drives, is that correct?
So far, you are absolutely right. Actually, no. Now that I think about it, Warp Graphics, which is our company, Wendy's and mine, put in an initial seed investment to get the ball rolling. Once the producer and the writers and Wendy's editing the scripts, and once we got a bit of a crew going and realized the potential for this, they wanted to take the initial budget estimate and grow it by a factor of 3 or 4 or 5 to get, just for example, better name, bigger name voice actors, a bigger orchestra for the a full score that's going to go behind this, just taking everything that was minimalist before and dressing it up in grand style. So that additional is coming from the fan involvement.
Imagine if you have a favorite movie, let's just, pluck Star Wars out of the air. Haven't you ever had the fun of just having it on while you're doing something else and just listening to the soundtrack?
Oh, for sure.
And you can see it in your mind while you're listening to the soundtrack. That is what this is going to be like. There are going to be sound effects. There are going to be different voices for different characters. There's going to be a beautiful narrator. There's going to be the most gorgeous music. We're absolutely blown away by the music we've heard so far. And so this will be like listening to one of your favorite movies while you're doing something else,
And you get to see it the way you envision it. We all know what Star Wars looks like, but every fan of Elfquest has a different interpretation of, what happens when this or that character moves or interacts, or what color the sunset is, or, there are infinite factors that make this very, very exciting as a realization of Elfquest in a different format.
Plus, between this and Hollywood, having the amount of respect and control that we are being given. I shouldn't say control, I should change that to input. We are part of the team. And so everything that is going into this, we get to oversee and give our stamp of approval,
I love that. I love that.
which never happens.
Well, of course, if you're raising anything over $5, no, you're absolutely right. And it's one of those things where this really does remind me of, the radio dramas. And I mean, people tend to forget before Orson Welles made Citizen Kane, he was, scaring people who was on the radio. And this really, I've got to imagine this whole process is allowing for some really interesting sort of creative ideas and sort of workarounds and things to do to come up as the entire process is unfolding.
You have no idea. Well, first of all, thank you for hearkening back to old time radio drama, because I like it. Wendy absolutely is a devotee of old time radio drama, and often will have it playing as she works. This was theater of the imagination. Orson Welles scared the country.
Yeah.
With a play that he said several times, this is just a dramatization. It didn't matter. People's imaginations were that strong. And with the technology that we have, the list that Wendy gave of an orchestral score and different voices for different actors, this is, and it's going to be episodic. So, stay tuned, tune in next week. That whole kind of thing is going to kick in as well.
That's another thing that makes this, in a way, an improvement on a movie, because in a movie, they plunk you down for 2 hours or sometimes 5 hours, as in Snyder's case. And, that's what you get. But with this, it will be serialized in chapters, and a lot more detail of the story. Even new scenes that fans never read in the comics are going into these scripts.
That's amazing. How has the response been just sort of online in terms of reinventing Elfquest for this new platform?
Well, it's interesting. Response has taken two forms. First of all, there was an early bird crowdfund campaign. And I think that didn't even last a week before all of the available slots were filled and all of the pledges were taken. And we were all blown away by that. So we are ready to move to the second phase of the crowdfund, but that response was absolutely mind-blowingly gratifying, because it said to us that the fans just really, really want this. They want anything Elfquest new, but this has captured their imagination. The response in terms of the content of it or the format of it, mostly, again, has been positive. There are some fans who look at the phrase audio movie and have a reaction that might be similar to the one with which you opened this interview, because it is audio, but as I mentioned earlier, we're beaming suggestions and words and music right into your brain for all of that to play on the movie screen of your cerebro, your inner cerebro. And people are genuinely excited about that. Again, Fred Greenhalgh, the producer, mentioned something to us. We have weekly meetings with him. And he said, there is a resurgence, just like there has been a resurgence of vinyl for long playing records. after a long digital period, there is a resurgence of what he called dedicated listening, which is to say, you're not trying to binge something, you're not multitasking, you don't have this on in the background while you're doing three other things. You allow yourself to be immersed in the experience of putting on headphones or having nice speakers surround you with the ambience of this story. And it's probably got a lot to do with COVID and the fact that we're all still relatively isolated and we want to be involved with something.
If you think about it, it is directly related to the oral tradition of storytelling. And, a radio play is something you can imagine yourself around a campfire listening to a story. There's really nothing better. As Richard said, I often have radio plays on while I'm working, and it's inspirational to me. It sort of feeds my sense of theater and inspires me in my own writing.
I absolutely love that. And I mean, I think a sense of theater and a sense of sort of grandeur that we create ourselves is definitely something that we need out there in the world right now. And I'm kind of curious for both of you, because I mean, Elfquest has been around for a while, obviously very popular, and you've done the ins and outs of Hollywood more often than you probably care to even mention. So, but that's another story entirely. But this really does feel like it it's the perfect timing for this. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, was
Yes.
transporting sort of Elfquest to a different platform, has that always been a goal for you guys, or is it just a question of this finally feels like the right time and the right format to sort of get it done and get it done right?
When I first told Richard the story, we sat down and I told him my idea for Elfquest. We discussed all the different ways that we could think of to bring it to the world. We discussed the possibility of writing a screenplay. We discussed, getting in touch with some of the people we knew in animation to see if there'd be an interest there. And comics was the format that we finally landed on because we realized that we wanted a very close combination between words and images. And comics was the ideal format to take advantage of both the writing that we wanted to do and the art.
And now that's a very interesting question that you asked, because after Elfquest, the comic book had been going for 2 or 3 years, we were approached by a book publisher with the idea of novelizing the content of the first 5 issues, which is in itself a little self-contained story. So we set about, Wendy wrote using the comics as a basis, but using language, using text to expand upon what the images showed, but also going between the panels, so to speak, as to what was happening that you didn't get to see in the comics. A couple of years after that, we're in the early 1980s now, an outfit called Listening Library approached us with the idea of taking that prose novelization and turning it into an audiobook. This was when audiobooks were just getting started. And they were mostly always simply a single reader reading the text, voicing the parts, maybe bringing an accent to this part or that part. But it was a very literal reading of the novelization. That came out. And it had been out of print for decades. I realized, since we're all still isolated because of the pandemic, that maybe I should get off my duff and digitize the old cassette tapes that the audiobook was on, and offer that somehow, put that out as MP3s or whatever, so that people had something to do, something to listen to that was Elfquest related. I made the digital files, and then I started asking around, what's the best way to get this out there? Should I just try to sell them bit by bit, or approach Audible, or approach Apple Music? I know nothing about such things, which is why I was asking around. One fellow put me in touch with Fred Greenhalgh of Dagaz Audio, who is the producer of the audio movie. And we had a 2-hour gab fest of a conversation, because Fred knew about Elfquest, knows about Elfquest, and said to me, in essence, why restrict yourself to a simple reading of the words? Why not turn it into a dramatic event? And he sold me. And that's how we got connected. And that's how we are where we are right now, with over a dozen people involved. And
it's happened amazingly fast.
Oh, yeah. Hollywood will court you, and they will seduce you, and they will auction you, and then you will sit on your hands for 2 years,
Right,
while nothing happens. These guys are wearing us out with their energy.
I mean, in any sort of endeavor in life, be it a creative one or something else, there's always going to be ebb and flow. But just by talking to you both, I can tell how invigorated you are by this entire process. And I'm kind of curious, how rewarding has it all been? Just on a purely personal level, to be able to sort of run through all this stuff and have people go, "No, what? You're not crazy. That's a great idea. Let's do it." And people actually do it, as opposed to, like you say, just being optioned and being put on a shelf and then nothing happens.
We've had many instances throughout Elfquest's 43, is it 43 or 44 years now?
I've lost count.
Well, Elfquest has been around 43 years easily. And over those years, there have been many times where we've connected with people who really, really get it. And we've had the joy of working with them either as writers or artists or in some colorists. Elfquest has been host to many talents over the years and these people have brought a lot of love to it and enriched it and helped it grow. And every time that happens, it's really a glowing feeling of pride that other people do get it. They do see it the way we see it. They do understand what our intention is, and they want to help make that grow and get further out into the world. It's wonderful.
Well, and that's a beautiful thing. And I mean, I think that kind of goes back a little bit to your point earlier, Richard, just about how everything is kind of cyclical. And I really think that, given sort of the ideas that you're putting into this and sort of the hope that you have for it and the way that you want to execute it all, it really feels like you might be on the brink of restarting something that we haven't seen for decades in terms of audio entertainment. And I'm really excited to hear what sort of the end result ends up being. And I just want to say thank you both for the time today, and congratulations again. This was a lot of fun, and again, I'm really looking forward to hearing it once it's done.
Well, thank you for some really excellent questions. And we are looking forward to, listening to the podcast when you put it up on your site, and
Sure.
Very much looking forward to each episode of Elfquest, the audio movie, once it starts dropping into, wherever it drops.
As many places as humanly possible, God willing. But, thank you so much again for the time today. This was a lot.
It was
thank
fun.
you.
Thank you, David.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental,
or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.